Welcome to the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. This podcast is about all things outdoor photography, including landscapes, wildlife, macro, and more. The show features two talented photographers, Henry Doyle and Ryan Taylor, who bring their different experiences in photography to the podcast. The show is released weekly every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so I hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. In today's episode, Henry and Ryan talk about focal lengths and their various compositional techniques. They go over prime lenses versus zoom lenses, different sensor sizes, and the best applications of certain lenses. As always, we hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to episode 32 of the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. And today we're talking about something that, is crucial to your photography and really affects your images in different ways.
Yep, we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of it and talk about focal length. And this is going to be a pretty broad episode about anything related to it. So we're going to dive into just different lenses that you can use and employ when out in the field, and our favorite subjects to take with them. And just, yeah, we're just kind of going to go off and just talk about all things with related to focal length.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people can get caught up and confused by different focal lengths. They sometimes forget that it's not just a longer and shorter, like there's different effects and stuff. So we'll be getting into all of that.
So I guess we could go off and start by just talking about the difference between prime and zoom lenses. So Henry, what's the difference between those two?
So a prime lens is basically one focal length. So say you bought a 24 millimeter prime lens, all you can shoot at is 24 millimeters. So it's fixed focal length. You can't zoom. Of course, you can crop and post, but it's always at that focal length. And generally, prime lenses tend to be sharper, have a lot more clarity because the lens designers only have to design the one focal length versus with a zoom lens, which has multiple focal lengths. So, say a 24 to 70, that designer will have to design all the way from 24 millimeters to 70 and make sure all the focal lengths are good enough. And also, prime lenses let in a lot more light usually. So, like you could see like a 24 millimeter 1.4. Whereas like on a 24 to 70, you might get like a f2.8 at the best. So um, different uses. A lot of portrait people use primes and just very versatile. Not the most versatile in comparison to zooms. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, you definitely got it right. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's like they're faster lenses because they do have a much more wider aperture overall. And yeah, it really just depends on the way you kind of use them, I guess. Like you said, portraits are great for that. I would even add in there like nighttime astro, just because it's much darker out. So you usually generally want the widest aperture possible as well. It just depends on really what you kind of approach, I guess, photography with, or if you're like on a job for something, or if you just creatively speaking want to try something different.
Mm. Yeah, I mean like you said, it really just depends. Astro, like you mentioned, it's a lot of the professionals will have like a 14 millimeter 1.8 because it's a small light lens and they don't need multiple focal lengths, and that aperture can let in a ton of light, so they reduce noise. But like daytime nature photographers like us, I know we both do a little bit of astro, but we're mostly like daylight, twilight. We'll carry around zoom lenses usually, or I know you carry around one prime, but for me at least, I carry around for my like landscape and macro lenses two zoom lenses, because I just don't have room in my bag to carry multiple primes for each focal length.
Yeah, I actually have two prime and two zoom, but yeah, you're
Oh,
about right there.
sorry.
It's all good. No, it's all good. At least at this very moment. So four lenses total. Which I mean, we can actually dive in that a little bit here, and I guess right now, if you want, we could just talk a little bit about our kit. So,
Yeah,
um,
sure.
yeah, I mean, so zoom lenses are probably what I prefer to use out in the field, just because of that versatility, like we mentioned. That way, I can just pull right into the scene wherever it may be, or however far away from me. But prime lenses are great too. They actually, I find it to be like a little bit of a challenge a lot of the times, just because it is a little bit of like I guess, creative challenge, and just something you have to kind of overcome that hurdle of, like, you have to move physically around. You can't use the zoom as like almost like a I don't know, call it crutch or whatever, a handicap. So, but yeah, I have one large telephoto lens that's a 150 to 600. in around the 75 to 300 range. And then I have a 50 millimeter prime lens and a 24 millimeter prime lens. So that pretty much encompasses entire focal range that I need to take many different nature shots, like macro, wildlife, big landscapes, small, tighter landscapes, everything pretty much. So yeah,
Cool. Yeah, you got the whole range covered.
pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
So I shoot on mainly three lenses. There's a couple, or there's one lens I don't bring in my bag usually. That's an 85 millimeter prime. That's for portraits. I've used it for the occasional landscape, but I really like it for portraits because it's like an f1.8, so it gets that nice blurry background and that nice compression at 85 millimeters. But for my main nature lenses, I've got three. Like I said, my wildlife lens is a 600 f11. I know f11. I'm gonna get hate for that, but it is a prime lens, so it's one focal length out at it's at 600, which I like for prime. Like I feel like I can kind of just focus on the wildlife a little bit more instead of worry about my zoom. Um, so I like the prime for that, and obviously it's maybe a little bit sharper than some of the other affordable zoom options. Um, and yeah, for my other shots, I've got a 24 to 240. I will say it's not the sharpest lens out of my three main lenses. It's definitely the lowest quality, but it's still very versatile. So that basically replaces a 24 to 70 and a 70 to 200. So it's like an all in one. It doesn't let in the most light, but I really don't care on that lens because I'm always at like f8 or something or higher. And yeah, that's just a very versatile lens. Great for travel because sometimes I can just bring one lens, that 24 to 240, and get so many different shots. Um, I do macro with that lens. I do long lens stuff. And yeah, it's really versatile. And then my main like wide landscape lens is a 16 to 35 f4. I got it recently, and I really like it. It's definitely the sharpest lens I've had. And I do some video stuff on it too. It works really well for that. Nice and wide. It is an f4. I didn't get the f2.8, but f4 is still good for astrophotography, so it's good to do a little bit of that on there. And yeah, so that's my main setup.
Awesome. Yeah, same for you. You've really covered all the bases there, I'd say.
Hmm. Yeah. I'll probably upgrade that 24 to 240 soon. Like the sharpness really is just bad on the telephoto end. Like the wider focal lengths, it's great, but once I get zoomed in, it's just noticeably blurry. So that's probably going to be a future upgrade. But I'm still pretty happy with all three of my lenses.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you always want to get the highest quality glass possible, but you know, you
Hmm.
work up to it too, of course.
Yeah, and that is kind of like the kit lens of my camera that came with it. So you know, it's very versatile. I'm grateful for all the pictures I've taken, and someday down the line. I'm not saying anytime soon, but someday.
Yeah, yeah. It's good for like a kit lenses are actually a pretty nice. Well, they're a great way to start photography, I think, just because they are a wider angle, but they also get that kind of more standard kind of 50 millimeter view as well. So they're very nice lenses to start with, but they do have
Yeah,
that
I
variable
mean,
aperture and everything too.
I think for nature photographers, that variable aperture really isn't much of a problem as long as you're not shooting like wildlife or something on it or something.
I couldn't imagine.
Oh
I
my
sold
gosh.
I sold mine I sold mine years ago, my kit lens, and I think for like $50 or something crazy. But those lenses are so cheap. Like if you really think about the specs for them, they're very low quality.
Yep.
Bundle them
Um,
with like everything.
my previous camera, which was like a crop sensor Canon mirrorless, I sold my kit lens for $12, and it was almost perfect condition. So it was just
Yeah.
a very bad lens.
I think after about I think a couple of years, probably 2 or 3 years, I'm just like, I outgrew this lens. I need to sell it.
Uh-huh.
I don't even know why. Yeah, like $50. Like, who cares? Should just kept it to mess around with.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, let's switch gears for a little moment here. And Henry, tell us a little bit more about crop sensor versus full frame.
Yeah, so we wanted to preface this at the beginning. So Ryan does have a crop sensor. I have a full frame. So basically, full frame is coming from the film days. It's the 35 millimeter equivalent format. 35 millimeter does not mean focal length. it's kind of a common misconception. It's kind of confusing, but it's actually the sensor size itself. So, a full frame sensor, I don't know if it's the width. I think it's the width, not the height, is 35 millimeters. Maybe. I'm not sure. But it part of the sensor at least is 35 millimeters. And that is kind of the standard in the industry. People are shooting medium format now, but most most like of the pros are shooting full frame. Um, only reason I went full frame is just because I just like the camera. I really could care less about the sensor size, but um, it's it when you have a lens, the focal length is not multiplied. That's one of the benefits. So if you have a 50 millimeter lens, you'll see a 50 millimeter equivalent, and you'll have that the actual light. The aperture will not be reduced like it is on crop sensor. It's pretty complicated, but like on say on a crop sensor, you have a 50 millimeter f2 lens on a crop sensor, it would be a 50 millimeter f3 lens because of the or 3.5 or something because of the crop factor. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Crop sensors generally do worse in low light, although nowadays that it's really not much of a problem. Just the camera companies don't like to tell you about that. Um, and you can still use full frame lenses on most crop sensor cameras, so it's really not a huge deal. I mean, full frame, there's definitely negatives. You have to carry heavier lenses. Um, they're bigger file sizes usually, and it's just more expensive, way more expensive. So, um,
Mhm.
different benefits and advantages. One thing I will say, since I bought a full frame camera, but it's a fairly low priced one. It's like about the same price as like a good APS-C crop sensor camera. I had a lot of trouble finding cheap lenses because it's full frame and all these full frame lenses are meant for these pro bodies. So I was having a very hard time finding affordable full frame lenses. Under like the $1,000 price range.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with that, I would say.
Yeah,
I'll stick to
I
my
found a
crop. Thank you.
couple good ones, but it's definitely like you can get a really good crop lens for like under 1,000, and you can get a decent full frame for like under 1,000, but you're not
I
going to get
think
like the pro ones, I would say.
the nice thing is the lenses all kind of work with each other. So like I have a crop sensor body, but like I could use a full frame lens on it. And
Hmm.
like you said, it does obviously change the ratio and magnification, of course, but it's fully functional pretty much without an adapter, which is pretty awesome.
And you're taking the center of the lens, which is generally the best with the crop sensor, so like you're getting good quality too.
Yeah, it's almost like it's just clipping and cutting out the edges of the sensor in the frame. So
Hmm.
yeah, like you said, just getting the best parts of it.
Yeah.
But would you recommend maybe like what's your kind of opinions on like full frame for like a beginner? Like, do you think people should just jump right in and get that,
I
or
mean,
start with crop sensor?
honestly, I would say probably jump into full frame nowadays if you have the money.
Really?
Like I would say, because I mean, there are some pretty big benefits. There's not camera companies aren't making a lot of crop sensor cameras anymore. So I
Mhm.
would jump into full frame, or at least if you're buying a crop sensor, invest in mostly full frame lenses if you're going to spend a lot of money on a lens. Um, because I feel like there's a lot of entry level like full frame cameras now. Like all the major companies have one. Sony,
Yeah.
Canon, Nikon, they all have like a $1,000 ish entry level. Um, Now there is the lens problem, but the problem was a lot worse when I was buying a couple years ago. They've made a lot of cheaper ones now, like my 600 f11, which is a full frame wildlife lens. That's $700 for a really good wildlife lens. So they're
Mm.
they're working on definitely more cheap full frame because I almost feel like these more budget full frame cameras are becoming like the new crop sensor cameras. I feel like.
Right. I think it's the technology for it. It's probably just
Uh,
like it's been around longer and been perfected that they can lower the price, of course, too.
Yeah, like cheaper to make the sensors and everything.
Yeah, yeah, production costs and all that. Yeah,
Mhm.
it makes total sense though. I also think it's also like micro four thirds and mirrorless have kind of entered the fold, obviously, and gained popularity in recent years. So I feel like that might be the reason why crop sensors just kind of diminishing all overall.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's Crop sensor, yeah, like the micro four thirds has its own benefits, and then you have the full frame with its benefits, and the crop sensor can kind of be in the middle sometimes.
Mhm. It's all expensive at the end of the day, though. That's the problem.
Yep.
But I guess it just matters on the one's preference, I guess. So I mean, like I started with the crop sensor. Well, I still have it, obviously, as I said, but like with it mainly because of the reason, like I said, I can still use full frame lenses or at least higher quality glass onto the same camera body. The magnification is great for wildlife, like we said, and that's like a big draw for me. I think so I can just get way farther out, with more zoom magnification, all the while not using like a teleconverter to get that farther reach. But yeah, I mean, like for a beginner too, it's like I recommend just I kind of go against what you just said, Henry. But I'd be like, I would start with this, smaller sensor and just kind of get
Mhm.
used to that. And it's mainly not really because of the sensor itself, but just the price tag. But like you said,
Yeah.
full frame is going down in price more and more. So I mean, like it's whatever the budget of the person may be, going
It
against, I guess.
it all depends on what you need to do. Like if you're like a exclusive wildlife photographer, I'd say definitely get a good crop sensor for your first camera.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
The best
but
quality crop you can get, or APS-C.
yeah. But like if you're doing like I don't know, like portraits or something, definitely get the full frame first, I would say, if you can afford it.
Mhm. Yeah, if you're doing portraits or nighttime or just like maybe stuff you're printing out real big, like a nice big waterfall landscape, like go with the full frame, I'd say. But
Hmm.
yeah, it just depends though. It just depends. There's so many drawbacks and advantages and pros and cons, everything. So it just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I love my full frame camera. Like, it's definitely, I definitely instantly noticed the difference from my previous crop sensor. The depth of field is really nice. The nice blurry backgrounds and like macro stuff, and I don't know. I feel like it's just kind of a lot of the photography, like industry, like all the products are kind of tailored for full frame. Like
Mhm.
they make bags that are sized for the size of full frame cameras, and they does I don't know. I feel like they kind of gear everything around full frame, which is probably not good. They should probably make more APS-C available products. But
I think maybe they're just trying to upsell you. Eventually you're
yeah,
gonna want to buy the better and bigger camera model.
uh huh.
It's a nice dynamic range, a much better one that is compared to APS-C. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah, definitely a lot more depth, like you said. But
Mm-hmm.
do you want to move on now?
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we can just go. We're going to basically now rattle off different focal lengths, just starting at the widest and going down, or going up rather to the largest at telephoto range. So wide angle lenses. These are typically I don't know anything wider than 10 millimeters besides fisheye, but typically they're going to be about 10 to 35 millimeters is going to be considered like a wide angle range. I think a lot of people even say 30 or 25 millimeters is wide enough, and anything beyond that's kind of like a angle. But anyways, that's a focal length that people primarily use for like let's say landscapes, at least wide angle ones, of course. I don't know, environmental portraits. What else would you probably use that for? Do you think? I mean,
Yeah.
just
So definitely landscapes, architecture. If you do that, you pretty much
Mhm.
have to use a wide angle. Like for full frame wise, they want you like usually using like a 12 millimeter or something. Like you have to be crazy wide for architecture.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know, like people who photograph buildings. I always see them using like wide angle lenses to like look straight up at the buildings. I guess that's also architecture, but kind of look straight up at the buildings in order to get a nice
Mhm.
angle.
Right, yeah, or maybe like a nice big flower field in the prairie or meadow.
And macro stuff too. Like people will get down and like get the full flower in the frame and maybe show a tree in the background or something.
Yeah, it's basically there's many different ways to do it, but kind of boiled down at its core, it's basically when you want to encompass the entire scene. I know it sounds really obvious, but it goes without saying. But it's when you kind of include all the details in front of the camera and the lens. Um,
Yeah.
Other
I
than
mean,
that, I really don't, I don't know what else much to say about it, but
if
maybe
you
some example.
for landscapes, if you want to get like a really nice foreground, wide angle lens can be really helpful. You can kind of angle it down, really accentuate that foreground and make a interesting image. I know that's like a cliche statement, but it really works. Like it's a really good technique.
I think nothing excites me more than like I know like starting out, I would always just take like a big wide angle landscape, but like there's something like you said, Henry, about like having a foreground detail or object like in that middle of that frame or in the foreground, I mean, but like just directly right there, and have the wide angle lens just point straight down at it. It just like it creates this kind of depth that's really nice. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like a nice depth to the scene they wouldn't get otherwise if you like let's say excluded it, of course.
Yeah, definitely. It can be, yeah, wide angle shot without a foreground could be really really boring. Like just be a really flat image that with no,
Almost amateur.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
But then there's
So,
also sometimes people who abuse it and they forget about the subject in the back, and they end up making the foregrounds too large. I've had that
right.
problem a little bit with my wide angle. Like it distorts that foreground so much that it gets huge, and that background could disappear a little bit.
Yeah, for anyone that wants to see that distortion, let's say, well, hopefully you have a wide angle lens of some sort. So take that lens, let's say, hold it handheld and just point it straight down at your feet at the widest you can get. And you're going to see that distortion most likely. And you're going to look a lot more like kind of taller and elongated if you were otherwise. Point it down at something and just see how it just plays on the entire scene in front of you. And it's going to look probably a little more surreal than you hopefully may even like. I'm not sure. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's distortion isn't always bad. Like, I mean, it can be really helpful as long as you like know how to master it. And just like you said, like distorting faces and stuff is a little bit scary, but uh, you just got to know how to use it.
Mhm. Which goes with practice, of course. So it's
Yep.
more than we can explain here. It's just trial and error. But wide angle is a lot of fun. I've really, it's funny, early on, I really just kind of shirked the idea of taking wide angle landscapes. But now, like, I kind of appreciate them more. You still have to, like, do with, like, what's in the scene. So it's not too chaotic or noisy. But, like, I really like enjoying it. Sounds like a cliche because, like, a lot of people do shoot wide with landscapes, but I really enjoy it now, over the
Yeah,
most recent years, I guess.
I feel that. I love like how it uh, like distorts the
So
sky.
big.
Like I love if there's clouds in the sky, like the clouds will like curve with your lens. I love that look.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it just makes everything feel larger than life, I guess.
Yeah,
But like I said, you have to be careful not to include everything because that could obviously turn on you and make a much more terrible photograph, I guess.
yeah,
So next up, now we're moving up on the focal length ladder, I guess, and we're going about 50 millimeter. And the reason why I stuck this particular focal length out, like we mentioned, is the 35 millimeter perspective with crop sensors and all that. But 50 millimeters is a really like standard focal length, I would say, and it's really a popular prime lens choice as well for doing portraits or just maybe a much more tighter framed landscape or think of. I have a 50 millimeter prime lens, like I mentioned, and I really enjoy it. I don't use it too much, if I'm being honest, but like when I do use it, I usually just take it around as like a simple walk around lens. Like I'll just carry that one only, and it really just makes some creative photographs. You really kind of get accustomed, I guess, to that focal length.
yeah. I think 50 is just a great focal length. Like you said, for landscapes, I find that if I'm doing kind of a little bit more of a angled in photo, I'm usually always around the 50 range. Um, yeah, I just kind of
Mhm.
naturally go there. That's where, like, even without looking at the lens, it's just kind of where I go. I really like it. It's just very natural. Very there's compression, but not too much compression. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really cool.
It's like the just right, I guess. Like you say, yeah, it's like compression's very minimal, but it's like not too wide angle where it just you look at the photo and it screams that kind of perspective. It's a nice in between. And if you just want to show like maybe on a street photography, it's like you want to just show the scene in front of you as is. That's like the perfect focal length, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's either that or 35. It just kind of like shows the natural scene. And kind of cuts out some of the messy elements.
Mhm. Yeah, crops it in, but not too much, so it just works out.
Yeah.
I will say it's great for video making too. If you haven't tried that with like a lens that has that focal length, like
I
50
don't.
millimeters is like a nice one.
Yeah, like it definitely works well, especially if you got like the nice aperture too to kind of blur it out.
Mhm. Yeah, it's like that kind of almost like a widescreen effect, like a 16:9. It feels like to me, it's like it has that nice cinematic feel to it. Because wide angle is almost too wide, and anything telephoto kind of gets too cropped in for depending on the video or scene you're trying to create for like a detail shot maybe. But like 50 mil is like a nice kind of solid perspective.
Yeah. I mean, it's popular for a reason. Like people talk about the Nifty 50. That's one of the first lenses they will buy sometimes.
Mhm. And it's like the one I have is a Canon 50 millimeter. There's a couple different models of that same 50 mil focal length that has, like, at least what Canon has. I'm assuming the other brands probably have their own equivalents, but the one I have is very affordable. It's only like $125, I believe. It's under 200 easily, and I've had it for many years now, and it's still kicking, like I said. But it's a nice lens, though. Nice to challenge yourself and kind of just experiment with it and just try out just that lens and see what you can come up with. And you might be surprised by the results too.
Yeah, it's very versatile for sure, and just very iconic. The Canon mirrorless just came out with a nifty 50, like a $100 50 millimeter lens. So maybe I'll have to pick that up at some point.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
that's a really good price. What's the
y-
aperture? How fast?
it's 1.8. Yep,
I think
and
I
it's
think mine's about like 1.4 or 1.82. I can't remember honestly.
yeah. I think usually they're around 1.8, but I'm not sure about yours. Um,
Yep.
yeah. What was I gonna say? I forgot completely. But
What's all?
any
It's go,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, it's all good. No, I was just gonna mention is like with prime lenses too. Is like this 50 mil? It's like it has a much more silent motor because there's not as many moving parts like it would be with like a zoom lens.
Mhm.
The focusing motors in these lenses are really quite, at least in my experience too.
Yeah, I mean that's very important too because a lot of people use those primes for video work, and definitely you'd want a nice quiet motor for that.
Mhm. And plus, also just camera shake too. That moving parts can sometimes throw it off too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what you're gonna say?
No, I did not. So we can move on.
Okay, that works for me. So now we're moving up on the zoom range or the focal length range now. So pretty much you go up next to 70 millimeter or 75 millimeters around there is kind of when you start entering the telephoto range. And that's when you get much more, I don't know, you have to see a far distant waterfall and you want to photograph just that. So you kind of zoom in with your lens and crop it out real nice and well. And maybe you want to start with some just, I don't know, maybe some backyard birds that are really close up. So you want to really pull tighter in the scene and compress the distance even further. And I would say about the 70 to 200, 70 to 300 range is what I consider small telephoto. But it's probably
Hmm.
wide angle. It's probably my favorite focal length to be in because you can just pull out so many different parts of different scenes in front of you, like parts in a landscape, and just make 6 photographs out of it instead of just one or two.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's a fun lens, at least focal length to just kind of once again walk around with and experiment with. And like I said, it's probably one of my favorites, honestly.
Hmm. One of my favorite things to do with that is kind of shoot the one wide angle first, and then move in and get like you said, multiple like telephoto shots. Really just experiment. Like even with the different focal lengths, you can get like a 100 mil shot of a subject and then 200 or maybe a 150. It's
Mhm.
very versatile. I find for like woodland photography, uh, a long lens is great. It makes it less messy, less chaotic, and it really simplifies everything and compresses it. And when we say compress, it's kind of like multiple things. Like it makes the everything look like it's kind of on the same plane, if that makes sense. And then it also kind of makes the backgrounds more like blurry, like not always just blurry, but more like I don't know. I don't even know how to
You can
describe it.
shoot. What you're trying to say, Henry, is like you can shoot the smallest aperture for that telephoto lens, but it's still gonna that compression is still gonna show up and appear in the image in the background, especially if there is distance. That is, it's gonna show up much more blurry. Is that kind of what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Uh huh.
shooting
Yeah.
like let's say a bird against a stone rock like outcrop or something, and it's like the bird is right there against the rock wall, it's going to show less of that blur. But like if you're in maybe like the middle of a prairie and there's like a tall grass, like a sedge grass, I don't know, swamp sparrow that's just hanging out, and you zoom in all the way and focus pin sharp onto that sparrow, and there's nothing else in the background really like immediately behind it, it's going to really show that compression and that distance.
Yeah, definitely. Um, it's just incredibly versatile. It's kind of become one of the most popular landscape lenses. It wasn't for a long time, but I feel like YouTube almost saved the telephoto lens for a while. Like Thomas Eaton kind of single-handedly brought it back. To be honest, like
Mhm.
he really just showed what you could do with it, and
I
he
think
definitely inspired me.
his most popular video still is it's titled "Throw Away Your Widening Lens." Like
Oh
I think that's the one of his. I think it is his most popular, but for good reason too, because he literally not throw it away, of course. But like what he means is like just put it away for a little bit and just try a telephoto and see what the results there.
yeah, I wouldn't say to the extent that he does that. Like I feel like you should still carry both lenses, honestly. But it is so versatile, and it you'd
It's
never think of landscapes with telephoto, but they're great.
it's his the you could you could argue like the title of the video is clickbait, maybe a little bit, but like I think what is just the sentiment he's trying to give us of like the delivery of his message is that it's you're limiting yourself so much if you shoot with just one focal length. Maybe we should have prefaced that before at the beginning of the episode, but like you limit yourself so much if you only shoot length. I'll say it again. And so it's like you just miss out so many opportunities. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's why like you and I both have more than one lens. We should carry three, maybe four with us we go out in the field. Because if we don't, we're going to miss out on so many opportunities. I know I would. Like I like to walk around with one or two lenses, sometimes two, but like you still miss out on a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So you really just have to carry multiple lenses unless you're really trying to limit yourself. Like you'll never know what you'll see really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's even those a little bit tangent, but there's even those like you ever seen those all like those big focal length lenses? I don't know what you call them. Like they go from 24 to the 400. You ever seen those? They're
Well,
like actually they actually exist. I
I
think
mean,
Tamron has one.
I have a 24 to 240. I mean, that's pretty.
But yeah, even that sounds like pretty good to me. Like that's a
Uh-huh.
good walk around lens.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. There's like a Tamron 20 something to 400. Um,
Or even five or six, maybe. Like it's
oh,
something
jeez,
absurd. Like there's
wow.
a like there's one that
That's got to
it's
sacrifice
it's
some
up there.
quality. Like, there's got to be some quality sacrifice for
I
that.
think some of those like secondary manufacturers like them and I don't know other ones like Sigma, they probably have something along those lines of like a wide angle too small telephoto. So you're gonna lose some stops of light, of course, but like it's still just mind boggling that that piece of like glass actually exists at all.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's like you literally have to like move the lens elements to make them longer inside of the lens. Like it's crazy all the stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, but I mean, hey, if you like, if some people probably have just that one lens and that works because it's all they need for what they do,
Yep.
photographically speaking. So I
Uh-huh.
really can't blame them for buying it. I don't know how much they are, but stacks.
Yeah, depending on the price, I can't really blame them for buying it. If
That's
it's
like
if
a
it's
bit of a, I hate to use this term, but it's like more of a generalist kind of lens, pejorative, but like it's just kind of like, it's good for
yep,
like the person that just wants,
dad on a vacation lens or
yeah.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like for the person who wants to shoot their kid's soccer game, but also the bird in the backyard, and do it in the same day without
Yep.
switching lenses. Wait for it, of course. So
Exactly.
yeah, but back on track now. But small telephoto. So I do lots of abstracts like this kind of way. I'll do intentional camera movement. Once again, like I said, just picking apart different the landscape in front of me. So like if there's, I know I've done this in the past, but if there's fall foliage, I'll like just zoom in real far on a tree line, pick out the best, most colorful parts, and then just do my little, moving back and forth mid shutter capture to make an abstract. Well, there's so many different applications of this focal length, and I could go on forever.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely like I'd be sad if I didn't have a lens in this range, just because it's just such a it's fun to work with. I think.
And people think that maybe cropping is kind of a from a wide angle is kind of a replacement, but like it's so different. Like a 24 millimeter shot versus like a 200 or something. Like you're not going to get the same look. Like you can't crop and get that kind of quality or get anything. Like you just it's unreplicable. I can't speak.
it's un it's un yeah unreflectable. Oh, crap, I can't even say it too. It's pretty bad. You can't do it. You just can't simply.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun one though. So it's one of my favorites for that reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, small birds even too, if I haven't mentioned already, or just not small birds, but just birds that are closer up. So maybe they will be like small backyard songbirds or something that maybe the local goose or duck at the park that can get really close to. I know some of my earliest bird shots were taken in this range too, because that's all I
Yep.
had before I got
Same.
something larger than 300 mil. Yeah, you too.
It used to be so frustrating to shoot on a 7200 and try to get like close to a bird because I just couldn't. I would put on the crop mode of my camera, which would reduce it down to an 8 megapixel image, and still that wasn't close enough. And I was just so sad.
That's awful. I wonder how like years ago I had the patience to get birds up close, because a few of my favorite bird shots were like 300 millimeters. But like I'm thinking about nowadays, I'm like, if something's a little speck of dust far away in the lake or something, I'm like, that's a bird, right? If it's too far away, I'm like at 600, and I'm like, this isn't good enough. Get it back then. Being so
Yeah,
patient,
I feel like
it's
wildlife
crazy.
photographers just we all struggle with focal length envy. Like we just it kind of haunts us sometimes.
We try so hard to get like the teleconverters stacked and everything, and the farthest reaching lens, and we're like,
Yep,
it's hard, but it's important to show the landscape too. So I'm not going to discredit that.
of course.
It can be though. I guess it depends on your outcome at
Yeah.
least. But yeah. Further ado, the last one, I guess, the last section. So this is anything beyond 300 millimeters. This was basically like I guess, standard or very large telephoto. And this perspective is pretty much for like wildlife, and sports photography, just stuff like that. Mainly, you could always, of course, do landscapes and anything else genre-wise with it. Maybe a far distant city skyline or something. But I know for you and me, Henry, it's like we usually do it for birds, mammals exclusively, right?
Say that again. Sorry, you cut out.
I know for you and me, Henry, it's like we use this focal length mainly for like birds and probably mammals exclusively, right?
The only other thing I use it for is sometimes I like taking pictures of the moon just for fun and like some far away objects. So it could be nice for that. But yeah, mostly wildlife. Occasionally I'll kind of zoom in on a plant because it kind of looks cool with the compression. But yeah, most
Right.
of the time it'll be wildlife.
But the night that we're recording this, it should be the super moon, the pink moon.
Oh really? Oh,
Yeah, tonight. Yeah, the night we're recording this.
I'll have to go take a
But
picture after this.
I know, yeah, same here. But yeah, you're right. Though I do kind of use that magnification of like 600 mil as like or really like a telescope almost. Put the camera in live view on a tripod and see the there's on the moon or whatever you want.
Yep.
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
But for birds in general, like the long telephoto is just really kind of essential. I mean, it's it produces quite the unique look with all that those blurred out the blurred out branches and just the how the background falls out of focus as long as you get your focus right.
Mhm.
And it just looks really really cool.
Right. Yeah. It's what separates like the amateur from the pro. I think is you can just tell like almost in like an instant of like you look at the image and you're like I can tell, like at least for me I can tell like a professional quality lens perspective. You know what I mean? Versus like anything else like a phone or I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
something that's
I mean,
less than
yeah, super
that range.
telephoto like super telephoto lenses, you can't recreate that on a phone. Like it's impossible.
Oh no,
There's
no.
nothing you could do. Like, I'm sorry, anyone out there who's a phone photographer, but
Maybe someday though, but years
I
from now,
hope not.
maybe. I don't
I don't know.
know. We'll be out of business.
That's the day I quit
Yeah,
photography. Yeah.
dude, you're telling me the lens attachments on phones, but
Uh-huh. Scares me.
yeah. Hey, welcome it with harmony.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Um, but yeah, it's a nice focal length for just messing around with and doing birds. I really don't use it for much else. I do like to try every now and then if I'm in like a big body of water, like a lake or something, really far away. I could try that at like this farther focal length, but yeah, like we said, it's mainly just really use this, zoom range for.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of anything else that I shoot like on a weekly basis. Like it's all wildlife.
Mhm.
Have you ever found the problem of? It's not really a problem, but your telephoto lens is too long for like deer and some bigger animals? Because I have that problem occasionally.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess if they're really close and like you cut out like their legs and feet, which is like a cardinal sin of like photography, if you ask me, when you start out, is cutting out legs and feet of stuff, but
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah,
If you're just too close.
sometimes I'll switch to my shorter lens to get deer shots just because of the
Hmm.
closeness and whatnot.
Lenses. That's that takes skill, man. Shoot.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm kind of like the deer that I see a lot are very domesticated, so they don't mind
Okay.
humans. So I can get really close. Of course, I stay my distance, but they're so big. Like with a 200 millimeter lens, you can get right in on them.
Yeah, you're right though. I can think of one time about 2 years ago. I was out in the snow, like very early morning hike, and I had my telephoto lens, I think, already on the thing, and there was some deer like probably like 3 or 4 feet off the trail, just staring me down, and I got like the most beautiful bird, or excuse me, deer portraits of them beside the trail, and I think I was probably about 200, 300 millimeters though lens. The important thing about this zoom lenses, at least in this range, but I know some great bird photographers that use prime lenses actually in this focal length, which is crazy to me. Like I just can't imagine that.
Yeah,
The
I
images
mean,
because of it.
I love using a prime. Like, but it
Mhm.
would I mean, you cut out a bit, but were you talking about a specific focal length or?
Oh no, nothing. Yeah, no focal length in particular,
Mm.
but just basically like a 400 millimeter prime,
Uh,
600 prime.
yeah, I mean, I using a prime for mostly all my wildlife. Especially for birds, I find it's great. It just, like I said, very eliminating or eliminating, very limiting. And I just don't have to think about zooming. And I feel like
Mhm.
sometimes you can get a little off balance where you have like that big zoom sticking out of the end of the lens, like it's already heavy, and then that lens comes out. So I just like the look of the prime. It's very sharp. So
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying, but obviously the larger focal length, typically the larger and heavier the lenses are going to be, just because they have to, hold much more motors and stuff and all that, electronics inside the lenses themselves.
hmm yeah.
But that being said, there's some nice prime, like my wide angle 24 lens. It's called a pancake lens because it's literally like so flat. It's insane how much the jam pack into this little lens, but you can literally fit it in your pocket.
Oh wow.
So
Jeez.
yeah, no, it's super tiny
And
lens. Like you barely. It looks like you're just shooting with just a DSLR, like no lens. It's so low profile. It's crazy.
and your landscapes are really sharp, so I guess it doesn't really contrast and or compromise in image quality or anything.
Yeah, I think it's f2 or f2.8. It's
Uh-huh.
one that, yeah, obviously a prime lens, like we said, it's like it's going to be much more sharper, a faster lens overall. Yeah, I don't really go below 5, I think,
hmm
and I do mainly shoot landscapes, of course, with that lens.
You ever done like a bird with that lens?
That there's a good few times where, like I said, it's like you're at the local community park and you get this really or something that's really habituated, and you can get real close to it. I don't think I've ever actually done it, like pulled it off successfully, but there's been a few times where I'm just like, man, I could really just use a wide angle right now. Like I'm too close.
I'd love to
Um,
use a
but
16
it's
to
something to
35
keep in
on a
mind.
bird
That kind
someday.
of Nat Geo look, like
Yeah.
the photojournalist look, because they show
Uh-huh.
like the habitat, like the penguins or something. Just walk right alongside them. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I feel like that's good for like a short telephoto. I feel like you could probably do something like that
Mhm.
at like 70 or 80 millimeters, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you ever like try to experiment with like using a really small aperture? I know you said with your f11, but like, do you try to incorporate a lot more habitat landscape into like a bird shot?
Well, see, that's the thing. So it's an f11 lens. And it can only go at f11, so I can't go past. It's stuck at f11 basically.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't like showing a lot of chaos, but that F11 is interesting. Like I noticed,
Well,
like since other photographers have the option of shooting at like way lower, like 6.3 or 4 or something.
mhm.
I find my images are very different from a lot of wildlife photographers. Like I show a lot more of the scene just because I kind of have to. But I like it most of the time, unless it's like a really chaotic branch, like ton of branches. Then it looks a little like amateur. But if there's like a lot of subject separation and I get down on eye level, it's you could never tell it's f11.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that last part is so right. Like if you're eye level, it makes all the difference. Like if it's an eye level perch or something, if it's a bird or a mammal or something. But yeah, the subject separation distance in between, like let's say the foreground, midground, background, it creates all that depth within the lens, the telephoto lens. But what I kind of mean, I guess, is like, yeah, you don't want chaos, of course, most of the time shot, but like I just mean like you got a nice mossy little tree trunk that the bird's sitting on or
Oh,
whatever, and you might
yeah,
show some like
definitely.
bouquet in the background. When I think of habitat, it doesn't have to be like chaos, like every tree branch around this
Uh,
bird. I just mean like enough to kind of get the sense of the sense of place in the scene.
I mean, that's kind of my favorite part of bird photos. Really, is the habitat around it. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
a big fan of those photographers. I'm not calling anyone in particular out, but like, I'm not a big fan of those photographers who like do like they've got like the 600 f4 and they're always at f4 and just have a completely
Oh,
like
sure.
disappearing background and it's just the bird. That's has its purposes, but I love showing the environment. Like maybe there's some berries on the tree or like you said,
Mhm.
some moss or just anything like that.
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, there's a place for every kind of image in that what we've mentioned, and yeah, it just depends on what you want to shoot, of course, or maybe the luck you have. Because I got some of my best shots just real close, and like you said, it's just like a clean slate, like a gradient light, behind the bird or whatever. And then other shots are like my favorites just because it does show so much of the scene in front of it or around it. It depends on which really is your tastes, I guess, and how you approach, taking a wildlife shot.
Mhm. Yep.
Is there anything else you want to add about focal length? I think we
I
covered quite a lot.
I mean, I don't think so.
Is there a favorite focal length or kind of range you prefer? I guess.
Um, my favorite would probably have to be like 600, I would say, because I just love looking
Yeah.
through it. Love how it compresses everything, and it's just really cool.
Mhm. Yeah, that's pretty much where most of my wildlife shots are at. No surprise, right? But I guess on the crop sensor, yeah, it is about 1,000 millimeters or so.
Hmm.
Even more, but like I said, I think for me, yeah, small telephoto and then wide angle. Like I only need those two kind of parts, I guess, if I had to
Yeah.
choose two.
Uh huh.
But you're right. Wildlife, of course, yeah. I want the farther the better.
Uh huh. I mean, we really like
You can
you and
never
I.
get too close.
Yeah, we use all the focal lengths. So like, it's when we say we like certain focal lengths, like there's the other ones are definitely close behind. Like,
I think it's important for every. You don't have to be an outdoor photographer, but just any person with a camera. It's like I feel like it's so important, like for your own creativity and just subject matter or genre, to just get like at least a good three lenses that cover this whole focal length that we've been discussing. and just that way you can get the variety of shots, and you don't have to really worry about like, well, everything, because like you ever look at like a portfolio or website and you like, or an Instagram feed, and you're like, you can tell all these shots are taken with the same lens. You ever look
Yep.
at that? It almost
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, which obviously there's exceptions. Like if you do wildlife exclusively, you're probably gonna be at the 600 or more, depending. But I'm saying like, a street scene, and then you're taking like a waterfall, and then you're taking a flower, and it's like they're all at 50 millimeter. It's kind of boring on us, honestly. Like it just looks really typical, I guess, because then everything just looks. I don't know. It's good to have a variety of focal lengths, is what I'm saying.
Yep. Well,
Mhm.
I think that pretty much concludes the focal length discussion, unless you
Yeah.
have anything else.
How many times you said focal length in this episode?
A lot.
If you guess it right, we'll have you on the show. Yeah, it's way too many,
Or you can just come on the show. Just whoever you are.
but
You don't have to guess it right.
that's true. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, make sure to also follow us on Instagram, of course, everyone. Uh, um, we're gonna try to keep the update as much as we can. DM us if you have any questions, comments, if you have anything really, or email us too. Share those questions or whatever on the show.
Yeah. You got any updates, Ryan?
Uh, not really at the moment. I don't think so. Just still doing the videos, doing some writing, some blogging. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, yeah. What about you?
Cool. Well, I'm back into YouTube, so I've done 2 videos so far. I'm trying to do it once a week. Next week I'm gonna do a "What's in my camera bag" video. I've actually never done one of those before, so it should be pretty fun.
Fun.
I like it. I'll just it'll be a very long video, I bet, but uh, yeah, that's gonna be
I
next
look
week's
forward to it.
video. Thank you, thank you. And then let's see what else. I've got some sponsorships coming. I can't say specifics, but it'll be pretty cool. So keep an eye out for that. It may not be on YouTube, but it may be on some other platforms. So you'll just have to see there. I've got an incredible volume of photos still to post from like my South Carolina trip, which is almost like a month ago at this point. So those will be on my Instagram. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. So
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all that. Your videos and photo alike.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right, well,
Alrighty,
thank
everyone.
you guys for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.